and welcome to Leadership Trailblazers, formerly Leadership Horizons. And the theme of our podcast is that the way that we led yesterday is not going to lead us into tomorrow. So I'm working with some trailblazing leaders in this podcast and also people who have innovated and created great impact in their leadership field. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome today Masud Khokhar, who is the Chief Digital and Information Officer for the University of Leeds. Masood and I have known each other for quite a number of years now, and I have great admiration for the work that Masood does. He's an immensely progressive leader and a tremendous supporter of EDI in leadership. So welcome, Masood, and thank you again for being with us today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lois. It's my pleasure. I'm a real honor to be on this podcast with you.
Thank you. So, we're gonna talk today, Masood, about your views on trailblazing leadership, and also remembering the things that we need to change and adapt, but also the things that are the foundation of leadership practice and what you've achieved in your world, and then think about the leaders of tomorrow and the way that they're going to need to adapt and change. So I'm going to start straight off with, what's your view, Masood, on what it takes to be a real trailblazing leader today?
It's a really good question. And I think it starts with what does it mean to be trailblazer, and also what local context you're operating within, and what does trailblazing looks like within that context. But there are certain common traits and certain common characteristics that I believe are essential for leadership today. I think one of the words that you used earlier is about adaptability. And I do believe that when you are operating in a highly uncertain and volatile environment, adaptability becomes a really important leadership quality that you need to exhibit and you need to embrace fully. So I would say an adaptable leader is a critical leader in today's world. I would also say someone who has the capability to do more foresight and more future gazing than before. And one of the big reasons behind that is the world that we are operating in is so unpredictable at the moment. Regardless of whether that's geopolitical environment, whether that's your local context, whether that's your sectoral concerns, there's so much uncertainty and lack of predictability at the moment. So someone who can have the foresight to at least plan for different scenarios and to start building the foundational blocks for how to cope with different scenarios and allow others to cope with those different scenarios, I think that's quite an essential trait these days. In those uncertain environments, I think we also need someone who is able to make decisions and decisions with the amount of information that they have at any given time. The days of we will have the full complete picture and therefore we can make extremely informed decisions, I don't think that's there anymore. So leaders have to take calculated risks. Leaders have to make more capable decisions in that context and to bring others with them in that particular mode. I think that decision making with agility is quite an essential skill now. And then the last thing I would say is a people-centered, empathetic leadership model. We all have businesses that we operate in or organizations that we work with, but people are what make organizations succeed or fail. And if we lose sight of that, and if we lose sight of bringing empathy in that decision-making and people centricity in that decision-making, I think we lose the essence of why we are here in the first place as leaders. And that part is quite critical. So I would say those 3 or 4 things are quite high on my agenda as someone who you mentioning as a trailblazer leader. So it's not necessarily something unique. It's just that things that were already qualities of good leadership, I think, are now heightened more in the current kind of scenarios.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And there's a couple of things that I'd love to come back to just to pick up on what you said there. So I think that agility and adaptability in decision making is absolutely crucial. How do you personally balance that, Masood, with the expectation that, you know, certainly I've come across, and I'm sure you have, of some of the people that you lead, that you're able to provide certainty for them?
Yeah, it's tough. That's the honest answer. And I think there's something about us recognizing that people are different and everyone will require a different level of certainty or a different level of operating model to succeed. As leaders, we need to recognize that. As leaders, we need to acknowledge that we need to bring people with us in that journey. And often the case is to be very honest and transparent about those things. Sometimes people find that a bit difficult to understand to begin with, when someone will come in and say, I actually don't have all the answers. I am working on them. And they start thinking, oh, is that because they don't want to tell us something or something else is going on in the background? But once you start developing that culture of honesty and transparency and integrity, they start believing that you are genuinely what you're saying. You genuinely believe in what you're saying. And I think that's the kind of culture I want to set, being very honest and transparent about things. And most of the times my response is, I don't have an answer to this, but I'm working on one, or I can find one, or why don't we work together to find an answer on something to get to the conclusion that we need to reach. So I think that honesty and transparency becomes really important as a cultural trait in an environment which is uncertain, where there are no black or white answers anymore. You have to operate in the gray quite a bit, and to be able to give people the reassurance that even if you don't have all the answers, you're being honest and transparent with them.
I think that what you've said there about the honesty and transparency, and not saying that you've got the answers when you actually haven't. Just taking that one step further, because you also talked about that leadership being people-centered and being able to demonstrate empathy. And one of the things that I've certainly come across is that in that honest and transparent culture, the empathy, if people feel that you understand them, even if you can't necessarily give them everything they want, that is crucial. What do you personally do, Masood, to make sure that people feel that from you?
I think active listening is so important in that situation. Making time to do so is really important. Effective communication is really important. Often for people who are developed into leadership, especially if they come from a specialization side of things. For example, my career started with a specialization model where I was a software developer and then an enterprise architect, and then ultimately in leadership. You often think of communication or engagement or active listening as add-ons, but they are essential things, essential ingredients of good leadership. And majority of the time, people feel that satisfaction when they're being listened to, even if you don't agree with everything, or even if you don't agree with majority of what they are saying. I think the very first thing is to be able to give them the kind of license to be able to say what's on their mind, and to generate the time to be able to listen to that. Often the next stage of that is to then say, I've listened to you, I've understood your concerns, but here are the reasons why I would not do what you're saying, and to close that feedback loop, because that is also quite an important thing in leadership. Often leaders have to work at organizational scale, which means that some people will always be unhappy. It doesn't matter what you do, but just being open, transparent, and give rationale and reasoning behind decision making wherever that's possible. I think that help build that culture of being listened to, being heard, but also people start reflecting on you're making the decisions for the widest benefit, even if that doesn't work out for any particular individual in the most immense way that they've perceived it to.
Yeah.
That would be my feeling around that.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, and I'd just like to see if you agree with this, because I often talk to the people that I work with, and I'm sure we've had this conversation at some point during the time we've worked together, that in any staff group and any team that you're leading, there's going to be probably around about 20% of people who are 100% with you right from the beginning, and there's going to be about 10% of people, and obviously those numbers are quite arbitrary. It's going to be about 10% of people, and it wouldn't matter what you did for them, they're still not going to be happy. But you've got that whole bunch of people in the middle who are capable of being swayed either way. How do you, I mean, first of all, would you agree with those kind of dynamics? And I'm not going with exact figures there, they're quite generic. But would you agree with that, Masood?
Yeah, I would. And it's like any change curve, to be honest. You'll have your promoters, you'll have your detractors, and a lot of people in the middle who are who can be brought into that promoter side or can be swayed into more kind of a detractor side. I do say something often, which is if 10% of the people are not disagreeing with you, you're not pushing the boundaries enough. And I think there's something in our self-reflection as leaders about if we are pleasing everyone, we might not be doing the very right things that we need to do to move the organization forward. So balancing the empathy with achieving the ambition and organization goals is such a critical thing in that particular dimension.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I did a little piece a few weeks ago on leaders needing to understand what they stood for and what they stood against. And in your initial answer, Masood, about what it takes to be a trailblazing leader today, you said a lot of these qualities are qualities that were always the foundation of good leadership, but they're heightened in today's environment. And one of the things that I've observed is that whether at one point there was a tolerance of those people who disagreed or maybe weren't able to get on board for whatever reason, that tolerance is reduced now because organizations can no longer afford to carry those people. How do you, as a leader in that environment, manage that dynamic?
Yeah, and these are tough decisions we all need to make. I think the kind of environment, and it really depends on which organization you're in and the kind of culture of that organization or kind of culture of that sector as well. But higher education has particularly been more conservative in terms of its approach towards capability management or people management, real management in the past. I think that's being looked at with quite a stronger lens now, particularly for those reasons that as an organization that needs to be effective and efficient, we all need to play our role in making that organization effective and efficient. And leaders are particularly important to push the ambition forward while also ensuring that people are coming with you in that journey and recognizing that not everyone would come with you. And in those scenarios, enabling those people to go succeed somewhere else or having some very direct and difficult conversations with them about maybe this no longer is the right organization or the right role for you. There is no shying away from that. And I think that's so important now. And particularly for those leaders who found it difficult to have those difficult conversations, I think that's where the adaptability and the capability needs to change quite rapidly in those scenarios. Ultimately, we are a people-based organization, and people are what would make us or break us. So we always want to enable people to succeed. but we can't do that with everyone. And if we try to do it with everyone, I think we will fail.
I agree, and as I say, I've seen that in real terms. Certainly over the last 5 years, that has really ramped up, and it is difficult for many leaders. And you talked about earlier about people developing into leadership, and I know personally how much you put into developing yourself as a leader and working on your leadership. If you were giving advice to people who are coming into leadership now, what would your advice be to them, Masood?
I would highly recommend them to build adaptability as a key leadership thing. And the reason why I say that is in the early days of my own leadership journey, I was basically being taught the leadership models of what does it look like to be a leader. And in the more modern world, I think there is no single definition of a leader. And in particular, there's no single model of leadership. In the past, you would be classified as either you're a servant leader, or you're a kind of a directional leader, or you're a visionary leader, or you're a kind of operational leader. I think we need all of those qualities as leaders these days. And you need to kind of ramp up or down depending on the situation, any of those qualities at any given time. I know by default, my natural tendencies are either more analytical leader, or more systems thinker leader, or more directive leader. Those are my natural qualities. But I also know that in certain situations, I need to be really empathetic and very people-focused leader. In certain other situations, I need to be an extremely collaborative leader. And what I would really advise people coming into leadership is to recognize that adaptable leadership is such a critical thing. And to be able to have that intelligence, the emotional intelligence to recognize different scenarios and different situations, and to be able to adjust what they are bringing to the table accordingly.
Yeah, and as I say, I think that's fundamental. That understanding that we can't rely on one definition of leadership or one model of leadership. Again, I think there's always been multiple models of leadership, but I think people thought they could choose one. And as you say, I just don't think that's possible today. Thank you for that in terms of the advice for people coming into leadership. I'm going to ask you now about people who have been in leadership for a number of years and might have evolved in that way, thinking they could just choose one model. How would you work with those people to help them become more adaptable?
I think one of the key things we can do is to lead by example in those situations, and to support each other in that journey. Organizations, or any organization of any size, but particularly large organizations, don't have a single leadership. It has a lot of leaders in different areas, in different parts, who are leading the overall organization. And each of them will bring a strength to the table. It's recognizing those, having open conversations about what strengths do you bring to the table and how you can work more collaboratively to support each other. Could be a really important way for others to start learning and others to start adapting. I quite often work with my team, and again, going with that openness and transparency, I say, here are some of the amazing things you guys do, or here are some of the amazing things my lovely team is doing. But here are the individual things that I can really help you build more. And this is what I can do for you to build that. How would you feel about that? And generally speaking, a lot of people are acknowledging that themselves. They recognize that they bring certain strengths. They also recognize that they have areas of growth. And therefore, I can work with them to start saying, okay, I can bring my own level of expertise in here, or I can connect you with some of the other people who are really good at this. Or why don't you build a collaborative mutual mentorship model with this person? Just to push the boundaries a bit, just to start expanding the horizons a bit, and start really building their overall leadership approach in that more adaptable fashion. I think those are some of the practical things I do. Generally speaking, people recognize themselves, the kind of capabilities and qualities they bring, but also the areas of growth they have. It's just using that as a positive thing rather than a negative thing, and then enabling them to grow as a consequence is what makes the difference from a positive mindset to a negative mindset.
Yeah. And again, I think making that shift between it's not about fixing you. It's helping you to kind of make the most of your strengths and to grow, but to recognize when other people possibly can do things better than you can. And actually using the people around you more collaboratively.
100%. And if the whole team is like you, I think there's something wrong in that team.
Yeah. And I know, Masood, that you're that the current team that you're building something new within the University of Leeds. And what would you say are the particular challenges around all the things we've just spoken about in building something new within an environment that has historically been quite traditional?
Yeah, I think I would say one of the kind of meta issues that we're facing at the moment is the cognitive load factor around change. And what I mean by that is we are all exhausted, but we are not exhausted because we are necessarily doing more work than before. We're exhausted because of the amount of information that we need to absorb around us. If you look at what comes through news at the moment, it is all, generally speaking, quite demotivating and exhausting to read through. Then we look at all the change that is happening at a sector level or at an organizational level. It is also generally more depressing than positive at this stage. There are definitely financial concerns. There are really tightening of visa regulations, just a general hostility towards higher education. And those are really discouraging kind of news stories that you see. And that often comes at the expense of the most brilliant things that are happening in the higher education sector. We are really trailblazing the global economy, the global health sector, the global environment. There's some amazing research that comes out of higher education that shifts the future of this world. But those are not stories that we hear. So, consequence, we are all weighed down. We are carrying a weight on our shoulders, which is not necessarily about work, but it's kind of invisible weight. And when you introduce a new change in that, people don't have the cognitive capacity to absorb it in the best possible fashion, able to look at it as a positive thing to embrace, or to have the capacity to kind of have the time to think about it, the time to be able to say, oh, that sounds really great. How do I shape this in a positive way? So I would say one of the biggest difficulties is how do we bring a sense of positivity and optimism about some of the change that's happening when everyone is being pulled down in some ways because of the cognitive load that they have. So yeah, it's a bit of a meta challenge, but something I've observed over the past few years.
I think that's such an important insight. And so how do you do it? What are the things that you think you can do? You know, whether that's at local level, whether that's at national level, because I know you're on some national forums. What are the things that you think that you actually can do, even in small ways, to start to shift that focus from all the depressing, which I completely agree with you on, all the depressing stuff that we see and hear, to actually, you know, there are really good things happening here.
Yeah, I think one thing is to really build a personal culture and an organizational culture of resilience around this. And part of that is it starts with you. You have to build your own personal resilience in that context. And what does it mean to stay optimistic and positive, even in the face of some real difficult things that are in front of you? So those would be like one of the key things for leadership, is to really keep that optimism in those difficult scenarios. The other thing you can do is to highlight that positive story more. It's really easy for those to disappear amongst the wide set of other news. So keep reminding people about why we are here in the first place. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate and really dedicated to higher education is because we truly change the world, whether it's through our research, whether it's through creating the new generation of thinkers and strategic doers. I think we enable the future leadership to happen. But we don't talk about that enough. We don't celebrate that enough. So just that sense of optimism, that sense of celebration, that recognition of there are some amazing things happening. Don't let go of that. Don't let that disappear in the ether, and keep bringing people in that optimistic mode wherever possible. I wouldn't say it's easy, but I would say it is our job to keep doing that, even in the face of scenarios.
Absolutely. And I think that is so important. And you mentioned personal resilience there, Masood, and you know that I do a lot of work around this. And one of the things that I do see, with my one-to-one coaching clients, with some of the leadership teams that I work with, is that they're doing their absolute utmost to do what you said. Keep the optimism, help other people to stay motivated, but it does take a toll on them, because you're a leader, but you're also a human being, and you've got family, you've got other responsibilities outside of work. So what are your strategies for personal resilience? What do you do to help to keep yourself in that positive place?
And I think I'll start by saying that, firstly, there was a time when people could disconnect from work fully, and home life and work life were fairly disconnected. I think that's no longer the case anymore for all staff, let alone leadership, because there's a lot more kind of synergy between home and work now, with the kind of post-COVID working environment that we are in. And therefore, that disconnect is more difficult to achieve now between home and work. So you need to adapt to different strategies, and everyone will have their own strategy that will work best for them. For me, I have a very close network of family and friends that I can share some of those concerns about, or some of those difficulties with, and talk with them about what I'm going through. And just doing that enables me to be able to think more clearly in those scenarios. I think seek support. You're not alone in these challenges. Other leaders around you. Leadership is a lonely place. So those friends and those other confidants that you can work with, you can share thoughts with, you can bounce ideas with, your network becomes more important than ever in that context. So build that if you don't have that at this time. And then lastly, just having that set of colleagues around you who are also of the same mindset. I think if you are amongst a team which is extremely negative or extremely demotivated, it can also pull you down. So start building a team or a culture or an organization where naturally there will be some people who will be in that mode. But if all of them are in that mode, it's very easy for you to fall in the same kind of situation than if you have other colleagues who are also supporting you in building that culture of positivity and optimism. And I know it's not easy, but sometimes changes are needed to build that kind of culture. So start thinking about those changes.
And one of the things that I talk to people about as well is maintaining maintaining boundaries in the sense of, because I do agree with you that there is no longer that clear demarcation between work and home, particularly in the hybrid environments. But actually maintaining boundaries where you are able to understand the periods when you need some time to yourself, when you need, thinking time. It's one of the things that I think many people struggle with, because they're back to back in meetings, there's deadlines, but actually taking that time out to think, maintaining boundaries around what people can expect of you and what they can't expect of you. What are your thoughts around that, Masood?
I think that is so important, and we've lost sight of that, in all honesty, including periods where I've lost sight of that as well. When you are in those kind of crisis situations or firefighting situations, your natural tendency is to execute. You move away from that thinking space into that execution spaces, which is okay for a short period of time, but it's not okay if you are in that mode for a long period of time. Most leaders are recruited to think, to strategize, and then use their teams to deliver, not for them to deliver themselves. They are there to build people, they're there to build strategies, they're there to build operating models, they're there to do strategic forecasting, they're there to ensure that your finances and strategies are aligned. If you're doing things constantly, you're in the wrong mode, in my view. So time to think is so critical, but it's also very scarce at the moment because of the kind of environment we're in, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have to create it. You have to intentionally create it. If you can create that more systematically through effective diary management or meeting-free days or anything else, that's brilliant. Majority of us don't have that luxury. So I can only share what I do. And actually that's also good for my resilience in some ways, is I actually now create some time to go to the gym. And that actually allows me to, one, be a bit more healthy, but also to have that time where I'm not thinking about anything else, where I can actually just let my mind wander about the possibilities rather than the probabilities, and therefore be able to be more creative, more thoughtful, more strategic than I would be if I was stuck in an operational mode. Now, I do that often by creating some early time off from work to be able to do that. Others may have other strategies, but that one definitely works for me more than what I've tried in the past. And it's also good for my well-being and my mental health as well.
Of course, yeah. And as you say, in some ways, I don't think it matters what it is that you kind of put into that slot. As long, I've heard people say that they actually find that swimming helps creative thinking. Personally, I love to walk, and that helps me to think creatively. But I think being prepared to put something in where you're protecting time doesn't have to be movement related. I've heard people say that they, one leader that I work with, she has this strategy of having breakfast with herself once a week. And she goes to Costa or a cafe and has breakfast, and she deliberately has breakfast with herself to give herself thinking time and creative space. So I don't think it matters what the strategy is. It has to be one that works for you. But it is really important to have that strategy.
Yeah. By the way, I love that idea. I'm going to adopt that and have breakfast with myself now.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely a brilliant strategy. When she told me about it, I thought it was amazing. So yeah.
I love that.
So just coming on to a slightly different topic, but obviously it's one that's very important in terms of the work that you're doing as well. And I think links into what you were saying about empathy and people focus is AI. Obviously, that's a really big topic for all of us at the moment. How would you say that AI is impacting your leadership and other leaders that you work with and are familiar with?
Yeah, and I mean, let's start with the fact that AI is absolutely going to impact everyone's work. And it's interesting that we still find people in kind of polarized camps about this, where some people are still actually trying to convince themselves or others about, well, actually, it's just something that will disappear. That's not going to happen. It's going to impact everyone's work one way or another. And leadership is also included in that. I think as leaders, the very first thing we need to do is acknowledge that and to start thinking about what does it mean? And it will mean different things for different parts of the organization at different levels of the organization. So, for example, we are looking at AI from 3 to 4 different lenses. One of that lenses, what does it mean for the future of education? Because it has huge potential impacts on the future of education. And from that, we are really looking at the pedagogical impact. We are looking at how we reshape, how we assess future graduates, what kind of skills and attributes would they need to have, how will they be ready for the industry that they will be going in, and how do we give them all the right capabilities and skills to succeed and to thrive in the future. So that's the educational angle. On the research side, I think there are some amazing possibilities that AI brings, both in terms of acceleration of existing research, but also in identifying new things or new areas of focus that were previously non-identifiable through just human effort, or may have been identifiable with decades of human effort that now can be identified more rapidly and more quickly. And therefore, there are some really amazing vertical opportunities of delivering new forms of discoveries and impact through AI-based research or AI-enabled research. On experience, I think it's really critical to think about how AI is going to change our experience of dealing with any organization. We already see AI being embedded in lots of customer engagement. We do see that AI sometimes is very successful and sometimes it isn't. So what's the right balance in how you use AI? But one of the fundamental principles in which we are looking at AI or AI-enabled information is to really think about where do we want to keep the human time in this journey. And if we are constantly being engaged in answering some very basic questions about where is this building or how do I access this, self-service will be able to do that a lot better. And especially if those kind of things are coming at the expense of real human engagement around people who might be struggling with seeking help, or people who might be struggling with mental health issues, or students who might be worried about what jobs they need to have, or career advice, but we are not finding enough human time to do so. I think there's some amazing possibilities that AI can bring to let go of the transactional things that we deal with and move them more into self-service angle to allow more human-focused engagement for things that really do matter in those contexts. And then the very last thing which we're looking at AI for is what would be the future of AI governance and how do we really regulate AI? And that's not just at our organizational level. I think that's a really important national consideration that we also need to take part in. So yeah, it's an amazing technology. I think the public access to that has really revolutionized looking. And I'm a huge supporter, but with a human-centric AI lens on, and a very do it right lens on.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that I've seen emerging actually in lots of conversations, both on and offline, is that bit about that actually I think the rise of AI, which I agree with you is amazing technology and I think is fantastic when it's used right and used well. But actually I think one of the fears was that AI would completely, replace the want and the need for human connection, whereas actually we're seeing that come to the fore, that people want more human connection, if not less. And I think that, getting that balance of allowing AI to do the things that it does amazingly well, and obviously the technology is evolving all the time and at speed, but staying human and giving ourselves time for that human connection is just, I think that's one of the biggest opportunities around.
Yeah, I think now is the time to really elevate that message even further, because uh, ultimately, what any technology, including AI or any automation, helps us do is to reduce what's transactional and continuous, things that are happening again and again, and often at the expense of what really matters to humans. And I think we need to balance that equation. We really need to go back to what is it that really matter in that human engagement, and how do we elevate that by using technology in the most effective fashion, not technology to decide what really matters first, and then use technology to allow that to happen and succeed more. And if we do it that way, I think it will be far more successful than any other way around this.
Yeah. And would you be happy just to share, Masood, in terms of the work that you're doing? Because I know you went into this new role last summer. How that is shaping up within your work and your university.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for us. I think it would be fair to say that we are at an early maturity stage. Most organizations are at the moment. I think we are in a lot of piloting, adopting technology, and actually sometimes adopting a technology can help us realize some of the legacies that we also need to sort out before we can let the technology enable some of those things. So just to elaborate a bit more, I think we are looking at how AI could help enhance learning even more for our students. We know our students will really, really benefit from more personalized support around preparing for examinations, around preparing around their learning materials, around demystifying some of the difficult concepts into more absorbable pieces of information. We also recognize that students and staff with neurodiversity can really benefit from that. And therefore, we are really looking at how AI can help assist learning, not replace learning. I think that is a really critical point to make, but assist learning more for our students in a more personalized way. So that's one area of focus for us. Another area of focus for us is to start building capability around what AI tools and technologies can help do. So we are training a large number of our staff on AI Academy training or data academy trainings through different models, through apprenticeships, through digital champions model, through self taught approaches, through LinkedIn Learning, lots of different models, really to start building that sense of capability and literacy around what AI is and what it can do or can't do, and how to use it in the most effective fashion. We are looking at reducing some of the load that our frontline teams have at the moment to allow them to have those deeper human engagement and to be able to support our students and staff more deeply in those conversations, to have the time and capacity to do so. And we are also looking at how we effectively govern this and make sure that this environment is not necessarily controlled, but coordinated effectively, so that all of the concerns around data and privacy are also well maintained. I would also say that a lot of people are polarized by AI, and my view on that is AI is a very nuanced world. It's a broad spectrum concept. When we say AI, it's not one thing or another. It's a broad spectrum concept, and there's nuance to this conversation. I am also of the view that there are certain things we shouldn't be using AI to do. because they are a drain on energy requirements or other things, but it has value. And how do we effectively use that part of that value while also maintaining the kind of ethical or wider concerns that we have? But it's a really deeply nuanced conversation, and I would encourage people to engage with that nuance of this conversation rather than AI is not good or AI is good kind of conversation.
The next thing that I'd just like to pick up on is right at the very beginning when we asked the trailblazing question, you also talked about that that leaders today need to have more foresight than previously, and that needs to be something that you've kind of consistently got your eye on, is what might be happening next. And I wonder if you've got any views on what you see as being the things that are going to be really important for leaders, both in the higher education context, but also in the wider context. What's your view on what's going to be coming up next that you think is going to be really important for leaders to have their eye on?
I think that's such an important question. There are a few things I would say. I think first, and I do apologize, it sounds like I'm saying something that I've already said, but give yourself the license to have the time to think. I think it's so important to create that capacity to do some independent research. If you have organizations that support you in your strategic thinking, for example, if you're a Gartner customer or an Infotech customer or something else, use their facilities, create time for that, read the materials through, and let your mind wander, because that's so important in that kind of strategic, long-sighted thinking. In terms of my own view, I think it's really important to say that predictability is out of the window at the moment. It is very difficult to predict what's going to happen in the next year or in the next 5 months, let alone next 5 years. But what good leaders do is they imagine the possibilities, and then they start shaping their thinking against those possibilities. And I think there are quite a few possibilities that can happen within the higher education sector at the moment. I think it would be fair to say that I believe the sector will shrink. I think whether that's the total number of higher education organizations that are out there, or whether it's within the setup that you have, there will be some shrink. I think that's purely a sustainability question than a more wider question, but it does have wider implications. I think place will become even more important. Higher education at the moment is, again, a very wide-ranging sector. There are higher education organizations which are global trailblazers. There are higher education organizations which are really rooted in their local city or local region. I think more organizations will be rooted in their local region and their local city and will act as anchor institutions for the prosperity of the local economy, local productivity, local health, all those things as well. I would also say that there will be more regional collaborations that are likely to build as a consequence, whether that is around clustering of research or whether that's around clustering of how different disciplines are being taught or how different areas of focus are being generated. If an organization is trying to teach every discipline while another organization next door is also trying to teach every discipline, I think that will just not balance in the future anymore. I think there will be more localized or regional clustering of different disciplines that is likely to happen. I would also say that more industrial collaboration will happen. I think the shape of research is likely to change in the future, and we need to start thinking about how do we effectively generate more industry-focused, direct productivity linked or direct health linked or direct impact-linked research. So those would be some of my views in the higher education side. And again, leaders would need to stay on top of that and be actively engaged in those conversations.
That's really interesting, particularly the focus on local as opposed to perhaps global, where I think quite a lot of the focus has been previously. So that's really interesting, Masood. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'd just like to end by asking you two things. What would you say you are proudest of in terms of what you've achieved as a leader, and what would you like to achieve as a leader in the next 5 to 10 years?
Gosh, those are big questions.
I know.
What am I proudest of? I think there are certain things that I feel very proud of, and that's because they hopefully paved the path for other leaders to follow in that dimension as well. So I am from a global majority background, or a minoritized ethnic background in the UK. And it was really interesting when I became the director of library and archives at York, a Russell Group university. And at that time, I was trying to really understand how many people like me have done that in the past. And same when I became the university librarian at Leeds before I was appointed in my current role. And as far as I can tell, there hasn't been any person of color in a Russell Group University library at the very top position beforehand. Now, I haven't done a whole systematic analysis of this, but as far as I can tell, I'm not aware of anyone. And I feel quite proud of that, not necessarily because I have done it, but because I hope that that's given others the chance or the confidence to feel that they can also do it. And there's something about that implicit role modeling that I'm hoping will give others from global majority backgrounds or minoritized any backgrounds to feel that they can also be in those positions, even if at any given time you feel that things are against you or the system is against you. So I do feel very proud of that.
Yeah, I think that's a credible achievement.
Thank you. What I would like to be in 5 or 10 years in terms of my leadership is to be able to generate the kind of impact that will transform an organization, both from a business perspective and from a people perspective. And they are so interconnected. But if I can shape the future of an organization for its long term, which is always what I believe in, I recognize short-term gains, but my strategic thinking is always about what would we be in 10 years or 20 years time. If I can set the foundations for that at Leeds or any organization, I would want to be in 5 years time where I have set that for Leeds, where I can say that I now feel that Leeds has all the right foundations for it to be a successful institution in its digital, but also wider endeavors for the next 10 to 20 years. I will be very proud of that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Masood. And thank you so much for, again, guesting today, sharing all your insights with us, being so honest in your answers to the questions. So I really, really appreciate it. And as ever, it's a pleasure to see you. So just before we do close, can I just ask if people do want to get in touch with you to engage in any conversations about leadership or the work that you're doing at Leeds, how would you like people to contact you?
Firstly, very, very welcome to us. So please do get in touch. The best way to connect with me would be on LinkedIn. So you can just find me by searching my name on it, or to get in touch with me via my email address, which the easiest one is cdio@leeds.ac.uk. So that's cdio@leeds.ac.uk. And those are the two best ways to connect with me. So feel free to do so.
Okay, wonderful. And from my point of view, again, thank you. We'll close there, and I hope to see you again soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and very, very best wishes for the Leadership Trailblazers podcast as well.
Thanks, Masood. Thank you.